to prevent the fuddy-duddies, Lan the elder and Lan the younger, from dragging him out of bed in the middle of the night to rain punishment upon him. Wei Wuxian clung to his sword the entire time he slept. However, the water was quiet and the air was still, and when the next day arrived, Wei Wuxian came to look for him, overjoyed at unexpected good news. Wei Wuxian, luck is really on your side, he said. Last night, the old man left for Qinghe to attend the discussion conference my clan is hosting. We don't have to listen to lectures for the next few days. Without the old one, only the young one remained. This would be easy to deal with. Wei Wuxian rolled off the bed and laughed while putting on his boots. Heaven's charmed clouds are blessing me with shade, he said. Zhang Cheng was beside him, polishing his sword with loving care when he decided to spill cold water over Wei Wuxian's head. Just wait until he gets back. You can't escape punishment. Why worry about things happening after you die while you're still living, Wei Wuxian said. A few days of freedom is a few days of freedom. Let's go. There's no way we won't be able to find a few pheasants on this mountain of the Lan clans. With arms around each other's shoulders, the three passed the cloud recess's grand reception hall. Suddenly, Wei Wuxian let out a shout of surprise, stopped in his tracks, and exclaimed, "Two little fuddy-duddy Lan Chans." Several people exited the reception hall and headed directly toward them, led by two youths who resembled sculptures of ice and jade. They wore the same snow-white robes, and even the tassels that dangled from the swords on their backs were identical and fluttered together with their ribbons in the wind. Only their manners and expressions were markedly different. Wei Wuxian could tell them apart immediately. The one with the stiff wooden face was Lan Wangji, whereas the gentle one could only be the other member of the Lan clan's twin jades, Zewujun, Lan Xichen. A crease formed between Lan Wangji's brows when he caught sight of Wei Wuxian. The former glowered fiercely but briefly at the latter, as though he would be sullied if he stared too long. His gaze shifted toward the distant scenery. Lan Xichen smiled and said, "You two are?" Politely, Zhang Cheng said, "Yunmeng's Jiang Wanyin." Wei Wuxian also spoke politely, "Yunmeng's Wei Wuxian." Lan Xichen returned the gesture. In a low, mosquito-like buzz, Nia Huisang said, "Xichen Gege." "Huisang, I recently returned from Qinghe," Lan Xichen said. "Your older brother asked me about your schoolwork. How is it? Will you pass this year?" "I think so," Nia Huisang replied. Looking like a withered and frost-bitten gourd, he glanced pleadingly at Wei Wuxian, who laughed, and said, "Zewujun, what are you all setting off to do?" "We're cleaning out some water ghosts," Lan Xichen replied. "We discovered that we didn't have enough people, so we returned to look for Wang Ji." "Xiongzhang, there's no need to spend so long in conversation," Lan Wangji said coldly. "It'll be inconvenient if we are delayed. We ought to depart." "Hold on," Wei Wuxian said hastily. "I know how to catch water ghosts. Zewujun, why not bring us along?" Lan Xichen smiled, yet said nothing. "It would be improper," Lan Wangji intoned. "How is it improper?" Wei Wuxian asked. "We catch water ghosts at Yunmeng all the time. Besides, we don't have any lectures to attend the next few days." As Yunmeng had many lakes and rivers, it also had an abundance of water ghosts. Thus the members of the Zhang clan were indeed adept at handling the creatures. Wanting to redeem his clan from the loss of face it had suffered over the course of his stay, Zhang Chang said. He's not wrong, Wei Wuxian. We could definitely be helpful. It is unnecessary. The Gusu Lan clan is also. But before Lan Wangji had finished speaking, Lan Xichen smiled and said, Splendid, many thanks. Please take a moment to get ready, and we'll set off together. Huisang, are you able to come as well? Even though Nia Huisang wanted to accompany them and join in the fun, running into Lan Xichen reminded him of his brother. Too afraid to play around, he said, I can't come. I have to go back and review. By behaving like this, he hoped that he could induce Lan Xichen to say some good things about his studies the next time he met his brother. Wei Wuxian and Zhang Chang returned to their room to make preparations. As Lan Wangji watched the two figures depart, he frowned and said, baffled, Xiongzhang, why are you bringing them with us? Their laughter and horseplay are ill-suited for handling water ghosts. Both Chief Zhang's top disciple and his only son have always had fine reputations in Yunmeng, Lan Xichen replied. Laughing and playing around are not necessarily all they can do. Though Lan Wangji declined to reply, I beg to differ was written all over his face. Lan Xichen spoke again. Also, don't you want him to come? Lan Wangji was stunned. Lan Xichen continued. From your expression, it seemed like you had wanted Chief Zhang's senior disciple to accompany us. That was why I agreed. As if a deep frost had fallen, the area before the reception hall grew still and silent. A long time passed before Lan Wangji could get out a reply, and only with difficulty. Absolutely no such thing happened. He had yet to finish defending himself when Wei Wuxian and Zhang Chang returned with their swords at lightning speed. Lan Wangji could only shut his mouth and say nothing more. The group mounted their swords and set off. The water ghosts were haunting Caiyi town, a town located over 10 kilometers from the cloud recesses. Caiyi town's waterways were all interlinked to the point where it was unclear whether the place was a town covered in a densely interwoven web of rivers, or a web of rivers around which houses crowded, packing the shores. The walls were white and the roofs grey, and the canals were full of boats which teemed with people and baskets. All along the banks, the townsfolk bought and sold fruit and vegetables, flowers and plants, pastries, beans, tea leaves, silk floss, and bamboo carvings. Gusu was just south of the Changjiang's lower reaches, and the voices of its people were soft and gentle. When two boats near the group happened to collide head-on, toppling several jars of glutinous rice wine, even the ensuing argument between the boatmen sounded like the chirps of orioles. Though Yunmeng had many lakes, it had fewer water towns like this. Wei Wuxian's curiosity was piqued, so he pulled out some money and bought 2 jars. Passing one to Zhang Chang, he said, Gusu people speak so sweetly. How does this count as an argument? The sight of Yunmeng people quarreling would scare these people to death. Lan Chan, what are you looking at me for? The reason I didn't buy any for you wasn't because I was being stingy. I thought that people from your family weren't allowed to drink. As they had stopped only for a brief rest, they soon boarded 10 or so slender boats and rowed toward the place where the water ghosts were gathered. The crowd of residents standing on the shores gradually thinned, and the river grew quiet. Wei Wuxian and Zhang Chang each occupied their own boat, and they raced each other while listening to information related to the water ghost infestation. Up ahead, the river flowed into a large lake named Biling Lake. Caiyi town hadn't had a water ghost haunting in 10 years, but within the past few months, people were constantly being thrown overboard, and cargo boats had also started sinking out of the blue. Lan Xichen had been setting up nets in the area the past couple of days. Originally assuming that the nets would catch 1 or 2 water ghosts, he was greatly surprised when they caught more than 10. After cleaning up the corpses and taking them to town to make inquiries, he found that not only did several corpses go unclaimed, none of the locals recognized them. Yesterday, he set up the nets again and caught several more. Wei Wuxian said, "You might think they died somewhere else and then floated here on the current, but it doesn't seem likely. Things like water ghosts stick to one area. Usually, they recognize a single patch of water as home, the place where they drowned, and they very rarely leave." Lan Xichen nodded. "Not bad," he said. "Thus, I thought this haunting was no trivial matter and asked Wang Ji to come with us, just in case." "Jun, water ghosts are very smart," Wei Wuxian said. "If we row slowly around like this, looking for them, what happens if they hide at the bottom of the water? Won't we be searching forever? What if we can't find them?" Then Wang Ji said, "We will not stop until we locate all of them. It is our duty." "So we're just going to catch them with the nets?" Wei Wuxian asked. "Correct. Unless the Yunmeng clan has some other method," said Lan Xichen. Wei Wuxian smiled but didn't answer. Of course, the Yunmeng clan also used nets, but since he was a strong swimmer, he always jumped directly in and dragged the water ghosts straight out of the water. But this method was dangerous and certainly couldn't be used in front of people from the Lan clan. If news of it found its way into Lan Qiren's ears, Wei Wuxian would be taught a lesson that he couldn't avoid again. Changing the topic, he said, "If only there was something like fishing bait that could draw the water ghosts in, or something that could point in the direction they are hiding, like a compass, that sort of thing." "Lower your head and watch the water," Zhang Chang said. "You're letting your fantasies run wild again. Concentrate on looking for water ghosts like you're supposed to." "Hey, mounting swords and flying was once also only a fantasy," Wei Wuxian said. As he looked down, he just happened to be able to see the bottom of Lan Wangji's boat. An idea popped into his head and he shouted, "Lan Chan, look at me." As he was focused on keeping watch, Lan Wangji involuntarily turned his gaze toward Wei Wuxian upon hearing him, only to be greeted by the sight of his bamboo pole sweeping down and crashing into the lake, sending water flying in his direction. Lan Wangji tapped his foot and leapt gently onto a different boat, avoiding the spray. Irritated that Wei Wuxian had indeed come to fool around, he said, "How pointless." But Wei Wuxian kicked the side of Lan Wangji's now empty boat and flipped it over with his pole. 3 deadly white water ghosts with bloated faces were clinging firmly to the boat's hull. The nearby disciples immediately brought the 3 ghosts under control. Smiling, Lan Xichen asked, "Wei Gongzi, how did you know that they were under the boat?" Wei Wuxian knocked against the vessel's side and said, "Simple. The boat's draft was off. Just then, there was only 1 person standing inside, but the water level was higher than it should have been for even 2 people. Therefore, there had to be something clinging to the bottom." "You are indeed an old hand," Lan Xichen said. Wei Wuxian swept lightly through the water with his bamboo pole and sent his boat into a swift glide until he was side by side with Lan Wangji. "They're boats now neighbors," Wei Wuxian said. "Lan Chan, I didn't intentionally splash you right then. Water ghosts are really clever. If I had said what I was going to do and they had heard it, they would have swum away. Hey, pay attention to me. Look at me, please. Lar Gongzi." Lan Wangji finally deigned to acknowledge Wei Wuxian's lowly presence and glanced at him. "Why did you follow me here?" he asked. "I came to apologize to you," Wei Wuxian said sincerely. "I was wrong last night. I made a mistake." The space between Lan Wangji's eyebrows darkened. He was likely remembering how Wei Wuxian had apologized to him previously. "Why is your expression so foul?" Wei Wuxian asked, already knowing the answer. "Don't be nervous. Today, I really did come to help." Unable to stand the sight of this any longer, Zhang Chang hollered, "If you want to help, stop blabbering and get over here." "The net moved," a disciple shouted. Sure enough, the ropes of the net suddenly began to tremble. Excitedly, Wei Wuxian called out, "It's coming, it's coming." Long, thick hair billowed like black silk around the dozen or so boats, and soon pairs of deathly white hands clung to the vessel's wooden sides. Lan Wangji drew his sword from behind his back. As Bi Chen left its sheath, it sliced through a dozen wrists on the boat's left side, leaving only fingers that were gouged deep into the wood, and the severed hands that they were attached to. Just as he was preparing to cut through the right side, a red light flashed past. Wei Wuxian had already resheathed his sword. The strange movements in the water ceased, and the ropes of the net grew still once more. Wei Wuxian had drawn his sword extremely swiftly, but Lan Wangji could already tell the blade he carried could be nothing less than a top-notch spiritual weapon. "What is your sword's name?" he asked seriously. "Sui-bian," Wei Wuxian replied. Lan Wangji stared at him. Believing that the fuddy-duddy hadn't heard his words clearly, Wei Wuxian repeated, "Sui-bian." Lan Wangji rejected the answer with a frown. "The sword has a spirit. It's disrespectful to refer to it with whatever name one wishes." "Can't you think in anything other than straight lines?" Wei Wuxian asked with an audible sigh. "I wasn't saying you could call it whatever you wanted. I was telling you that my sword's name is Sui-bian. Here, look." He passed the weapon to Lan Wangji, allowing him to clearly see the two ancient characters carved onto the scabbard's grain. Indeed, they were the characters for Sui-bian. Lan Wangji was speechless for a long, long time. "You don't need to say it, I know," Wei Wuxian said solicitously. "You want to ask me why I named it this way. Everyone asks me whether there's some special hidden meaning behind it, but actually there isn't any. It's just that when Uncle Zhang bestowed the sword upon me and asked me what I was going to call it, I couldn't find a name I was happy with, even though I came up with more than 20 of them. I thought I could just let Uncle Zhang name it for me, so I told him whatever. Who knew those two characters would really be on it when it came out of the furnace? Uncle Zhang said, given how things are, why not just call it Sui-bian? And actually, it's a pretty good name, right?" Finally, Lan Wangji managed to squeeze a word out from between his teeth. "Ridiculous." Wei Wuxian lifted his sword onto his shoulder and laughed. "You're really far too boring," he said. "The name's hilarious. It's great for messing with little fusspots like you. Works every time." Right then, in the middle of the teal lake, a long black shadow darted around the boats, encircling them. Still watching the water carefully for leftover water ghosts, after he had hacked through all the ones nearby, Zhang Chang glimpsed the dark silhouette and immediately cried out, "Here it is, again."